Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and this evening I will be joined by no one else other than you guys. So, plenty of room for us to have a chat in relation to tonight's fixture at Celtic versus Manchester City. I was reading reports online that there might be a slight delay with the kickoff. Does anybody have any update on that? I've got the old Celtic TV stream running alongside this stream. So, if there's any update on that, I will know all about it. So let me know straight off the bat if there has been any update in relation to a slight issue with a delay for kickoff. Let us know. It's meant to be midnight, and here we go. We've got the teams. Here we've got a report that the stadium has been evacuated, but that is down to an online report. Any update on that? Let us know in the comments, please. They have slept it out. Yes, poor timekeeping. 2 minutes too late. Jungle Lion, absolutely. Here we go. Come on, you boys in green. Let's have a good one. The late crew. This is all about just talking our way through tonight's game. We're going to be looking at the team lineups, of course. Celtic versus Manchester City. The biggest test. Celtic team line, first of all. We've got Schmeichel in goals. That is the big news, really, is the debut of Kasper Schmeichel, signed as Celtic's second arrival of the pre-season, and undoubtedly the number one to take over from Joe Hart. So he starts in goals. Former Man City player, of course. What other Celtic players have played for Man City? Let us know in the comment section. One that springs to mind, Jerry Craney. There you go. We've got Tony Ralston at right back. He's a player who has come back from the Euros as Scotland's first choice right back due to injury, and he starts the game tonight on the right-hand side of the defence. At left back, we've got Greg Taylor. And what about this for a central defensive partnership to face Manchester City, the Premiership champions? It's Stephen Welsh and Liam Scales. And I think that's one of the points of discussion that we'll have in relation to the weakness or otherwise of that. Let us know in the comment section what you're feeling about that defence coming up against some potent opposition. In the midfield, it's the strongest midfield I think we can expect. It's Callum McGregor who captains the side and starts this evening alongside Matt O'Reilly, who's been the vice captain over the last couple of games, and also Rio Hatate. And then up top, it's the forward three that I believe I've been talking about being your strongest at the moment. Again, let us know your thoughts on that. It's Nicholas Kuhn on the right-hand side, Dyson Maida on the left, and Kyogo through the middle. Is Kuhn first choice over James Forrest? Let us know. And what about the rest of the wingers that we have at the club at the moment? Obviously, we've got Yang, and we've got Palmer as well. I think it's one of those areas of the park that we really do need to strengthen. We have been talking incessantly about the lack of arrivals through the Celtic Park door. What's your thoughts on that? There were reports earlier on this evening on the social media that would suggest that the next one coming in would be Paulo Bernardo. We bring in Bernardo, we bring in Ida, and all we've really strengthened is the backup goalkeeper. So plenty of work to be done. What about the bench then? Who's on the substitutes bench? We were hearing during the week that Benji Siegrist may well have organised his departure from Celtic, joining up with Neil Lennon over in Romania. So the two goalkeepers this evening are Sinisalo and Scott Bain. If Scott Bain is the third choice goalkeeper this season, I can only guess that it's down to the homegrown player rule, because I think that we're at that stage now where you've got to promote one of the younger guys, but Bain is still in the building. We've also got Lagerbielke. Will we see Lagerbielke coming on for some minutes this evening? Palmer, who was modelling the away kit earlier on this week. And again, there's a lot of questions around his future at the football club. Yang, another winger who has shown in flashes that he definitely does have the technical attributes, but is he able to come into the side and staple down a first-team jersey? We've got Odin Thiago home. I think in flashes, again, he has shown that there are elements of his game that might allow him to carve out a career here at Celtic Park. Is it going to be this season, or does he have to go out on loan? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section. Kobayashi, as well, who has been playing left back over the last couple of pre-season games. Kwon, who spent the entirety of last season at St Mirren, is on the bench as well. We've also got Tomoki Iwata, who I felt played pretty well against DC United. We've also got Anderson, who I thought was excellent at right back. And we've got Lawal, who I thought played well against Ayr United and against Queen's Park, but wasn't so hot against DC United. He drops to the bench. We've got Dane Murray back from 2 operations, serious injury, and let's hope this season he can start finding his way into the first team. Jamesy Forrest on the right, one of our best performers in the first game of the American tour. Dady, thought he was excellent when I saw him playing in one of the earlier games. Donovan, again, showed up really well, the 17-year-old. That is did Turley. And Mikey Johnston, the perennial appearance of Mikey Johnston, and the discussion rages on as to whether or not he has a future at Celtic Park. Any updates on whether or not the stadium has been evacuated? It was online just a wee while ago. Is someone on the wind-up? Let us know. Here we go. George Robertson, you're straight in there talking about Bernardo waiting until Matty leaves so he knows he will play. I don't think so, mate. I don't think so. I think you bring in Bernardo and, when you talk about Matt O'Reilly, if the reports are to be believed and we have been offered something in the region of 18 million euros, then he stays at the football club. It doesn't matter whether or not the player wants a move. He is worth a lot more than that. So certainly he should not be leaving for that kind of fee. Kickoff at 12:30 this evening. As far as I know, the only place that this can be viewed is on Celtic TV. So we'll be tuning in at 12:30 to see Celtic facing a Manchester City 11 who line up as follows. Ortega Merino, Lewis, Simpson, Poussey, Beatty, Wilson, Isbrand, Phillips, O'Reilly. That's their O'Reilly, by the way. McAtee, Bob, Grealish and Haaland. I spoke earlier about Grealish and Callum McGregor coming face-to-face again. Obviously, part of both of those players' development was a loan deal at Notts County. And again, huge list of players on the bench. Ederson, Carson, Peroni, Wright, Katongo, Ndela, Galvez, Sissoko, Heskey, Doyle, Fata, Mfuni, Hamilton, Samuel and Knight. And it's one of the nights where we will probably see a whole host of changes, probably starting at half-time and then as the second half draws in with the heat in America as well. Davy Graham, 9:30 a.m. kickoff in Sydney. A big shout out to all the Celtic fans globally who get up in the early hours of the morning, and also the Acsom contributors who get up in the early hours of the morning to contribute to our daily bulletins. And earlier on today, I was joined by Ian Conroy, who dials in from New Zealand, and it's normally the early hours that he does that as well. It's a dedication that you see of Celtic supporters just to become part of a community, talk about the football. We're 10 minutes into the stream. We're 20 minutes away from kickoff. What are your predictions for this evening? You've seen both sets of lineups. I'm going to bring up that Celtic one again and just have a look through that in more detail because I've already made my feelings known in relation to the strongest Celtic 11 right now. And I'm looking at that side that's getting closer to what I believe to be our strongest 11 prior to bringing anybody else in. So let's run through that. Schmeichel is going to be the number one this season. There's absolutely no doubt about it. And when you consider the massive gaping hole that has been left by the departure of Joe Hart, who saw that comment the other day on Off the Ball where they were basically saying Celtic are not Joe Hart's team. This is obviously coming from someone who doesn't know the relationship and the bond and the connection that Joe Hart and Celtic formed over the last 3 seasons. The guy was a winner. He won 3 in a row. He won 3 league titles in a row. He won a double, he won a treble, he won a double. The guy leaves with all our best wishes and he retires. He was replaced, and it was going to take something special to replace him, wasn't it? Not just the ability of the goalkeeper, but the leadership quality and the experience. And what we've done is we've gone out there and brought in a goalkeeper that Brendan Rodgers knows really, really well. And he was speaking about him just the other day there. And it's Kasper Schmeichel, 37 years of age. As I said earlier on, a former Man City player who else played for both clubs, Celtic and Man City. I'm thinking Mick McCarthy. He had played for Manchester City under Billy McNeil, who was the manager of Manchester City. and then he signed for Celtic in a £500,000 deal, whilst Davy Hay was the manager at Celtic. It was Davy Hay's last signing, and Billy McNeill inherited him, a player that he knew well from Main Road, it was called back then. So there's another one. Let us know the players you remember that have played for both clubs. We've also had guys like Dedrick Boyata. We have also had Paddy Roberts as well, Joe Hart, of course, Kasper Schmeichel. Who else has played for both clubs? Let us know in the comments section. Mark Guidetti, he was a player that I felt would have done really well for us. Didn't really work out. Olivier Cham had played for both clubs as well. So, Kasper Schmeichel, I think he is going to be a massive player for Celtic this season. He has the experience. He's a winner. Comes from great stock, obviously. And he is currently the Danish number one, unless he is retired over the last couple of days, and I'm not aware of that. So he went to the Euros as the number one, and I think it was a cracking signing, to be honest. It's not happened as quickly as any of us would have liked, but he's obviously been at the Euros. It's happened, and he has a backup in Sini Salo, a player who was on Aston Villa's books. He had successful loan deals at Exeter and Ayr United, and he is the Finnish number one. Had a breakthrough season or a breakout season last year. And I think it's great to have a 22-year-old who's going to learn from someone with Schmeichel's experience. So I'm very, very happy now with the goalkeeper situation. I'll be even happier when Siegrist leaves the building. And as I say, Scott Bain still on the bench. I would much rather see a spot for young Clark or Oluwayemi to step into the berth of the third choice. People keep telling me Bain's in there because of the homegrown player rule. But correct me if I'm wrong, Oluwayemi's been at Celtic for 5 years. He is classed as a player who has gone through at least 3 years of development in Scotland. So he would be a player who would be classed as homegrown, as would Clark. I might be wrong on Oluwayemi. Let me know in the comments section if I am. Tony Ralston, right back. I've often said Tony Ralston is my favourite Celtic player. And it's not because of the box office nature of his name. It's just the story, the journey that he's been on since he came in, simply because he was the only right back we had at the club when Ange Postecoglou took the job after that interim period of Kennedy being in charge after Neil Lennon's departure. You looked through that squad and it was Tony Ralston or a guy called Lee O'Connor, who eventually went on to play for Tranmere Rovers. Tony Ralston got the nod, and Tony Ralston has been for me, a really invaluable member of the squad ever since. Jim Melrose played for both clubs. So he ended up being a agent, actually, Neil Lennon's agent, Jerry Craney. I mentioned him earlier on. Jerry Craney was a player who, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he was the last homegrown Celtic player who came through the ranks as a goal-scoring forward. Sometimes people throw in the names of James Forrest, Sean Maloney. I don't think they were strikers, were they? They were not centre forwards. Mark Burchill showed a bit of promise. But actually, tell me a striker that Celtic have produced that's come through the ranks and been a prolific goal scorer, one that's scored more than 50 goals for the club. It just shows you we've not had many of them. Kincladsey, nearly. Can you imagine that? That would have been incredible. Scales in Welsh versus Haaland. God help us, says Mick Harwell. I'll tell you something. It's a test for them. Jason Denier, how could I forget? Jason Denier, says Liam Cross. Denier was one of my favourites of that period. And I did think that we should have made as much effort as possible to get him into the club. I think he's playing his football now in Saudi, isn't it? So I think he would, for me, improve the current Celtic starting 11. And how could I forget Samaras? One of my favourite players, a cult Celtic icon, Paul McGurk, well remembered. Noel Gallagher. Well, he certainly supported both clubs, hasn't he? Good morning, Paul John. I think we'll win 2-1, says Norrie Boy Kearney. I would like to see it. It's the biggest test that we're going to have. And oh my God, here we go. Willow Flood. Craig Mackey, did you have to do that? Left back, Greg Taylor. There's a position. Greg Taylor is the left back this evening. And let's be honest, over the last 3 seasons, again, bit of a stalwart of the Celtic side. Ange Postecoglou came in and Taylor was converted to an inverted fullback. It's not a position really that Brendan Rodgers has used to the to the same kind of level as Ange Postecoglou did, but I think Greg Taylor had a good season last campaign. Why do I keep going on about improving him? I'll tell you why. So at the start of every season, we talk about aspirations for the new campaign. We're up against a quality side here in Manchester City. This is the type of team that we may be facing in the Champions League. They're a pot one team in next season's Champions League tournament. Celtic going into that game with some of the players who have served us very, very well over the last few seasons, I don't think will give us a best chance possible of progressing at that level. There may well be people out there who are happy for Celtic just to, dominate domestically. And of course, that is your bread and butter. That's the first thing you've got to do with a view to progressing on a European stage also. This is a football club who have got a proud heritage in Europe. People may well say, yeah, that was then and this is now, and modern football has left us behind, etc. If it has, then all the more reason for trying to pull us back into or onto the top table of the Champions League. And I think that I've said it a few times, I'm going to say it again if you're tuning in for the first time this week, perhaps, that going into the Champions League campaign, I ask the question every season, which players are you happy with going into the Champions League games? And last season, the list of players I thought were Champions League level for Celtic were Joe Hart, Cameron Carter-Vickers, Matt O'Reilly, Rio Hatate, Callum McGregor and Kyogo, 6 of them. As the season went on, I think Alistair Johnston crept into that list, particularly, after the season that he had, going over to the Copa America and performing really well as well in the Copa games. So that took us to 7. We then lost Joe Hart, taking us back down to 6. He's been replaced by Schmeichel, and I'm happy to say that at the moment we have got 7 players in the squad who are Champions League level for Celtic. And I always need to qualify this. They're not going to be the type of players who are going to win as a Champions League. They're not all the type of players who could play for a top Champions League club, although Matt O'Reilly may well be by the end of this transfer window. But I think we've got 7 players in our squad. So when I look at the starting 11 tonight, and I say Schmeichel is one of those guys, McGregor, O'Reilly, Hatate, and Kyogo. That leaves quite a few others who may not be up to that kind of standard. And that's what I mean when we need to bring in a stronger, more quality player at left back. Greg Taylor has served as well, as I said before. I think that he's targeted. I'm not saying anything groundbreaking by saying that, by clubs, including the Champions League games, but also last season, Aberdeen in the semi-final of the Scottish Cup targeted the left-hand side and did so to good effect, scoring 2 goals by pumping balls in to the area that should have been defended by Liam Scales and Greg Taylor. So it's not a personal vendetta against Greg Taylor. I think he's had 3 excellent seasons as a Celtic player, but very much like Ralston, I see him as a backup. I think we can do better. I think we need to buy a left back at the same level as Johnston at right back, and then we'll have a much stronger defence. And similarly, when you look at the centre half position, Cameron Carter-Vickers more than happy with CCV, but we need to have somebody at a level of Carter-Vickers. Now, I remember Starfelt, and Starfelt was someone who divided opinion for probably the entirety of his Celtic career. Couple of seasons at the club, but when he left, you start looking at him thinking, well, the partnership that he had with Carter-Vickers was almost more important than the individuals. And I don't think that Carter-Vickers has had the same strength of partnership as well as Liam Scales has done. This is not me having a dig at Scalesy. I think Scales is on the same level as Ralston and Taylor as a Celtic player, and I think we can do better. So we sign a left back, we sign a left centre back, and you look at that team, and I go into a Champions League game feeling far more confident. And of course, Scales tonight will be partnered by Stephen Welsh. Welsh has been injury plagued throughout his Celtic career. Every time he goes down, I get worried that his shoulder might give him an issue. So, as Philip says, big test for Scales and Welsh up against Haaland from the start. It'll be very interesting indeed. Celtic follower 3-2 Celtic, you say. I love the confidence. Pep has not beaten Celtic with Man City. Tony Cassidy, I love that level of confidence. And just to prove that we do stream on other platforms, we've got Steggy Mizuno 1 And left back is a must, has been for years. Yeah, it has been for a number of years. Matt auditioning for a City £40 million bid. Well, I'll tell you something. Whoever wants to buy him needs to come in with more than a bid of €18 million. That's for sure. Curly Watts, that's a great shout. I have seen Curly Watts corner in both a Man City jersey and a Celtic jersey. So great shout. Best shout of the night. Ian Conroy. What time is it in your part of the world? Is this a more amenable, civil time for you to watch the hoops? Are you getting up and enjoying a morning coffee watching Glasgow Celtic? We need Miofsky, says S. Bergen. Right, just to go back to the 12:30 bulletin, which I shared with Ian Conroy earlier today, my take on the situation up top is that there is no panic about Ida because I think Celtic are confident that we're going to get him. The big argument, of course, would be that we need two. We need to have three strikers, but I go back to the comments made by Brendan Rodgers. And this is in relation to the three strikers rather than the player I'm about to mention. When he was talking about keeping Rocco Vata, he said that he wanted the player to be that third, the backup striker, the development striker. And it gave us a sense that Brendan Rodgers had two first-team players, i.e. Kyogo and Ida, in mind, with the third being a backup. And I like the thought of that. So when you look at the Schmeichel situation, for example, I've already said Sini Salo for me should be his backup. And I think Olayemi or Clark should be the third choice. Bain, for me, follows Segrist. The other young goalkeeper, whichever one it would be, of the two that I've mentioned, would then go out on loan. And I think that's a good system to have. You're going to have your first choice and second choice that you can call upon, regardless of the competition that you play in. And then you have that third choice, just in between, behind them rather. And that third choice could be a development player. So we've seen some good things, I think, over the last few games from the likes of Deddy, Anderson, Donovan and Turley. I want to see more of them. And I think that's the type of player that you would happily, Dane Murray as well, happily look at as a third choice within their position. You move into the midfield, and all the talk has been around Matt O'Reilly. Callum McGregor went to the Euros with Scotland, and obviously, you know, as fit as he is, as consistent as he is, he needed a rest, and he's had a few games to get the feet up over the last few weeks. We've seen him returning against DC United, and here he is starting with the captain's armband. Brilliant to have McGregor back. McGregor will, I think, smash through the 500 game mark this season. He's that consistent. He will join a band of 12 Celtic players, just 12 players in the history of our club who have played 500 or more competitive games for Celtic Football Club. It's incredible to think of that when you consider that Peter Grant, I was going to say tomorrow, it's actually today, later on this afternoon, Peter Grant will join us at Barra's Art and Design, and he will be our latest guest on This Is Acsom, which will air at 6 o'clock on Friday night. Peter Grant seemed to be at Celtic forever. He didn't make 500 competitive appearances for Celtic. Yet Callum McGregor is likely to break through that figure this season, as is Jamesy Forrest, who's on the bench. So Callum McGregor, he's a captain. He's the guy that keeps everything ticking along. I think last season he was the epitome of what a Celtic captain has to be. He is the manager on the park, isn't it? It looks like it's Roasting says forever and ever Celtic, and that will play its part. There will be a lot of changes in that Celtic side throughout the game. Matt O'Reilly's the guy that's on everybody's lips at the moment. He is a player who was sensational last season. He didn't just do it domestically. He did it in the Champions League as well, winning Man of the Match awards. And he has come to the attention of a number of clubs all over Europe. Will we be able to hold on to Matt O'Reilly? Here we go. Peter Grant should go on a sponsored silence. Peter Grant is one of the best guys I've ever met, Maestro 95. He loves the Celtic and he loves talking about them. So we'll be having a wee chat with Peter Grant tomorrow. And actually, I think that he is a breath of fresh air on the Celtic TV commentary as well. I love the way that he always goes back and harks back to his days at Celtic. That's what I want to hear from an ex-pro. I want insight, I want experience, I want anecdotal examples as well. And he gives that in droves as well. Alan Robertson, the other channels are working. I don't know what you could possibly mean. Maeda is a striker, says Brown Warrior. Well, if you've been watching a Celtic state of mind since Maeda came in. Our very own Liam Carrigan, our Japanese correspondent, has been saying that Maeda is a striker. He keeps telling us that. Is he going to be the third choice? Is he going to be the third choice striker? Stephen Kennedy did not rate Peter Grant one bit. Peter Grant, there was a great comment made in one of our previous episodes with Tosh McKinley. He says if you turned around in that dressing room and Peter Grant was sitting next to you, you knew you were okay. He was a player that he described as being brave, not just brave in the tackle and up for a fight, but brave to go and demand the ball no matter what was going on in the park. If the chips were down, Peter Grant always made himself available, regardless of the form that he was in. So I'm going to disagree with you. I was a massive fan. I know he did not have the flair and the creativity and the skill and the technique of a Paul McStay or a John Collins. But I tell you something, Peter Grant, if he's in your team, he's somebody you can depend on. Matt O'Reilly, if he leaves, I've already said we don't take a penny less than 30 million. That's my view on the player. 18 million euros from Atalanta should be laughed out of the Celtic boardroom, and hopefully it is. Rio Atati, here we go. He's a player, one of three that I thought last season would have been outstanding under Brendan Rodgers. I named three players last pre-season. The first one was Matt O'Reilly, and he went on to have the season of his career. The other two, however, didn't have such a great time. Leo Labada, for other reasons, eventually left the club mid-season, and Rio Atati had an injury-plagued campaign. We've not seen the best of him under Brendan Rodgers. I was watching him with interest. I heard that Brendan is not a fan of his ball retention, continually loses the ball. I watched it against DC United, and because it had been mentioned to me and commented on, it became really obvious that he did lose the ball quite a lot. I love Rio Atati. I think that the creative players do lose balls because they take risks. They try and make a pass through the eye of a needle that doesn't always come off, so they do lose possession. We're in an era now of football where people are going for robotic perfection. You don't get that. And someone mentioned Kincladze earlier on, Samaras. These players did things. They did the unexpected. And I'll tell you something, they entertained as well. Rio Atati, for me, is a phenomenal footballer. And up until last season, when we've seen Matt O'Reilly's campaign, I thought he had the highest ceiling of a Celtic player. It's nearly kick-off time, says Ian Roy. Yes, it is. Coming up to past. Maybe I was a little bit late in going live. Jungle Line pointed that out. I'm going to refresh my Celtic TV stream and see where we are with regards to the kick-off. It looked as though the evacuation chat was a nonsense. It's not kicked off quite yet. It looks glorious out there. Massive big stadium as well. Both sets of players are not yet on the park. So let's talk about the top three. We've got Kyogo through the middle. If we sign Ida, I think most of the Acsom contributors are saying that it's horses for courses if you've got Kyogo and Ida in the same squad. Some games Kyogo will be perfect for, and others Ida. And in the same game, both players can be very, very effective as well. I think you pay the money, you bring Ida in on the back of Bernardo, hopefully within the next 24 to 48 hours, and we'll be feeling a bit better going into the new campaign after the 4 signings. And obviously, we will continue to look at some of the other positions that we have mentioned as well. On the right-hand side, Nicholas Kuhn, tell me your thoughts about my theory on Nicholas Kuhn. I think he's going to be a big player this season. People are saying to me on the socials, what has he done to make you believe that? And I'll tell you what it is, right? I think that in January, the 2 players that came in, the aforementioned Ida and Nicholas Kuhn, were certainly Brendan Rodgers signings. And he's shown a bit of faith in Kuhn as well. I think last season, Forrest had to play to get us over the line. Kuhn was still coming up to fitness. But he does seem to be a focused individual who, if he just gets a run of games, I think we'll see the real talent that Kuhn is, and I'm looking forward to it. I think he's been at a lot of big clubs previously, and it's not worked out for him. He has got a lot to prove, and when Celtic sign a player, if they've got the right mentality and they've got something to prove, sometimes we can tap into it, and that player can be sensational for us. And of course, the final player up top is Dyson Maeda. Celtic have got both trophies on display. I can see the Scottish Cup and the League Championship are on their pedestals right now, and we are awaiting both sets of players to come out onto the park. The other player, of course, is Dyson Maeda. It was pointed out earlier on, he could be a backup centre forward. Yes, he could. We saw him in a friendly match a year ago, scoring a hat-trick in the first half. If he is called upon through the middle, he gives you a completely different option, doesn't he? And there we go. That's us up to half an hour on the pre-match show. We were going to go to the action, and at half-time, I will be speaking about that first 45. So join us again. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved in the wee small hours of this Tuesday evening stroke Wednesday morning, Scottish time, Celtic Park time. 300 of you got involved, and many of you got involved in the comments. Thank you very much for doing that and supporting the channel. Give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel and come back at half time for another wee chat for 15 minutes. Thank you, every single one of you, for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.